welcome back to my channel. I have Stefanie as my guest today, and she is the rheumatoid arthritis coach, also has training in nursing.
I am a family nurse practitioner, yes.
Yeah. You have rheumatoid arthritis. You were diagnosed how many years ago now?
Formally diagnosed about 8 years ago, but looking back, it was a lot longer than 8 years.
How long did you have symptoms, do you think, before you were diagnosed?
Looking back, I can definitely see symptoms even as a small child and definitely as a teenager.
Now, I ended up seeing a Creaky Joints article that you wrote that I really loved, and it was about how rheumatoid arthritis sort of made you the person that you are today. Do you want to sort of share that a little bit more for people listening or watching today?
Sure, I would love to. So I had my first son at 28 years old, and I brought him home and I couldn't change his diaper. I couldn't hold a bottle. I couldn't breastfeed. My hands were so bad. My wrists were so bad, so inflamed. I had no mobility in my left thumb whatsoever. And I just knew something was wrong, and it was very life altering. Throughout the next year, I had gone to many medical providers. And granted, I was already a nurse practitioner for several years at that time. So I would go, and everything was, oh, it's your weight. You have this extra baby weight, or, oh, it's postpartum depression. And prescribers were giving me all sorts of prescriptions for NSAIDs and antidepressants and even stronger pain medication. And I put in the article that one doctor even told me I was just so depressed. It was this horrific postpartum depression causing my thumbs to not work, and that I needed to take my baby for more strolls. Those were her words, a stroll. And that I needed to exercise more and get outside more, and then I would be happier and I would also lose weight and I'd be able to take care of my baby. And I shared that story in that article because I left there so infuriated that I just could not even believe that that had happened to me. I am a medical professional. I listen to people all day, and I felt like that particular provider really dismissed me. So I ended up pursuing other providers. I've shared this before, but I actually ended up ordering my own blood work because nobody seemed to take what I was saying seriously. Everybody just kept attributing it to my postpartum weight, my postpartum depression, yada, yada. So I ordered my own labs. I went back into my primary. I showed her my labs, and she said, "Oh, well, let's get you started on the process." And that's where I went from there.
What labs did you order, if you don't mind me asking?
The diagnostic labs for rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatoid factor, the anti-CCP, and then the inflammatory markers, the SED rate and the CRP. I've been asking these other providers I was seeing to take it that step further and,
Yeah.
give me a good workup. Let's try to look for what this could be. And nobody was agreeable to do it. And, after you have a baby, you're kind of in a fog for a while. You're just surviving. And looking back, I definitely could have, spoken more clearly and done a lot of things to communicate better. But yeah, I just felt like it needed to be taken to that next level. That's a really good question. I don't think my perspective ever changed. I just think it broadened. It just got bigger because when I was diagnosed, my biggest thing was as a medical professional, I had seen the worst of the worst, right? You see good cases and bad cases of everything. And so I'd seen the worst of the worst, and I knew what RA could be untreated or not treated appropriately. And from that moment, I said to myself, I'm not going to let this happen. Everything I can control, I will control. So I did everything I could to find resources and support. And I was shocked, just completely shocked at the lack of resources that there were. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is a huge city, right? We're a huge city. And there was not a single support group. I couldn't find anything but online, on social media. I went to therapy, talk therapy. It's what you're supposed to do, right? You're going through a life change. You have this new diagnosis of a chronic illness. I went to 3, but the third one handed me clay and asked me to, show her my feelings in clay. And I was so appalled. I thought, if you had just Googled rheumatoid arthritis, you would know I can't do anything with clay. Like, I can't even change a diaper, let alone like mold clay. I was so like appalled by this woman. Obviously, I never went back. But So I would say my perspective broadened, and I just realized at that time that we needed more resources for the RA community. So from there, I mean, it was that very same day I contacted the Arthritis Foundation and I said, "Hey, we don't have a support group here where I live. What do you think?" And they said, "Sure, here's all the resources you need." I found a space and I started probably the most successful support group I have ever participated in. It was absolutely amazing. And I ran it for 3 years. I think that's really where my perspective just broadened, where I knew that people needed support and needed resources. And it also showed me that people need somebody to talk to that knows what they're talking about, but isn't always, the goal isn't always to treat you, right? Like, like how you sit down with your girlfriends and you want to talk about, your spouse, right? Like I would tell you, oh, just as an example, my
Yeah.
spouse never empties the dishwasher. And you would be like, oh, haha, mine doesn't either. And we would just bounce it off of each other. You're not trying to like work me through it. And so I just found that we needed these people to just bounce and validate and support and be kind to each other. So the support group really, I think that was definitely my pivot point, was that support group.
What year were you diagnosed?
I was officially diagnosed in 2013.
Yeah, I asked because I know back in those years, there wasn't a lot of support groups happening, even where I live in the Midwest. It wasn't like it is now with the support groups that you see in the pages and everything that's, up and running on social media. Like, I don't even think Instagram was really a thing fully. Twitter was around. I was diagnosed in 2005. So I can tell you that there was really nothing going on the internet except AOL, Yahoo
Yeah.
message boards, all that stuff. So that's why I was asking what year you were diagnosed, because I can understand why you felt so compelled to create a support group.
It's interesting to see things that maybe you don't struggle with, but other people do. And not that, I don't like when people say, oh, it could be worse, because that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see what other people's struggles were and how that impacted their life. It's a very good group to be a part of.
And what do you think made it the most successful? Because, you see people talk about how some support groups they find online, they're all maybe negative, people complain too much. I don't like when people say that either, because I feel like we should give room to people to express what they're feeling, because some may not feel comfortable going to talk therapy. Some may not have a referral to see a therapist or have the money to do so, or have people in their lives where they can, pick up a phone and be like, hey, I need to talk to you, or they feel comfortable doing that. So a lot of people tend to find comfort in people they meet online. There is like a fine line between overdoing it and setting boundaries for yourself and others. That's why people in support groups, they create rules and you have to follow those rules, or else you can get kicked out nowadays in groups on Facebook. I do want to know, because like you said, you created one of the first ones in Las Vegas and it was successful. So what were the things that made it successful?
I think I, not to toot my own horn, but I think I did a really good job at keeping it organized.
Mhm.
And I had a whole schedule and a system. And when we did meet up, I always had a very structured activity. It wasn't a lot of support groups are, you go and you sit in the room and you take turns talking. And sometimes that's a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
especially for people who don't want to talk. And then people who do want to talk sometimes can talk a lot, and then if you have to intervene, it's awkward for everybody. And so I always brought activities, and they were everything we did. I brought evidence-based psychological exercises that we could do together. One year we made vision boards, and man, that was so fun. I asked everybody to bring a few magazines, and we had like 1,000 magazines. It was like a scene from like Edward Scissorhands. There was like scissors and paper. It was so fun. And we all left with these great boards. I actually found a lot of resources in our town that had autoimmune type things. So we went to a Reiki session together, and we went to this woman who grew herbs and made anti-inflammatory teas and recipes. We went to anti-inflammatory cooking classes together. So it wasn't all intense talk therapy, even though we did provide that space that was safe to talk, but we did activities that really helped us to bond over things that maybe we couldn't do with people that didn't have RA.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I wish I was in
Yeah.
this support group. No, because I feel like when you're able to sort of do those activities that relate to the condition, maybe or maybe not, you can also like step away from it all, because it's sometimes nice
Right.
to gather with others and just do something fun to lessen the burden, I guess, or the load that you deal with 24/7. So I really like how you guys did all those activities. I think, it's hard to implement those during virtual support groups that go on nowadays, but that doesn't mean that you can't do an activity, an icebreaker, or something to connect others, and instead of just talking and sitting there and listening to people. Because like you made a good point, like sometimes people can go on like a longer rant or express themselves, and then how do you intervene when someone is sharing something important and vulnerable? How do you set that boundary without causing someone to feel maybe upset or something? So I think that's a good thing to include activities where everyone can get involved as much as they want to.
Yeah, it was really great. It was fun.
The title of the article was Rheumatoid Arthritis Made Me the Amazing Person I Am Today. I'm all about tooting your own horn when you need to. So I just want to know, like, how has it made you the person you are today?
So when I was first diagnosed, I was very overworked. I was definitely the burning candle at both ends type of person. I was working full time. I was not taking care of myself. I was trying to absolutely do it all above and beyond every single minute of every day. And RA really taught me to stop and reprioritize, think about what mattered, refocus, find out what really deserved more time. And as I took the time to do that, I learned that even though RA can be exhausting, and we all know the spoon theory, right? So, certain things take up more spoons, and everybody talks about how I have no more spoons or I did too much today, I'm going to be dead tomorrow, right? And it really taught me to use my spoons wisely. And so now every day I wake up and think, what is the most important thing for me to do today? And is it worth this many spoons? And most of the time, even when things do wipe me out, right? They take everything out of me and I have no spoons left, it was worth it because it was my priority and it's what I set out to intend to do. Because before I would just go, 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 do, 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 and then I would feel terrible. And then I would feel unaccomplished from doing that. So I think that that's how it's made me. I have to admit, Creaky Joints editors used the word amazing. So I'm so proud that that's what they they took from my story because I'm completely flattered. But that's what I think made me amazing and balanced and healthy today. And because of that, now I'm able to not only help myself and live a very high quality, fulfilling life, but I'm able to help others. And that is, to me, that is the most rewarding part of it all.
So going back to what you were saying in the article, though, you were mentioning how you had a career change where you had to maybe stop doing what you were doing. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
So I work in healthcare. And the job that I had at the time, I worked in a hospital. And if you've ever worked in a hospital or been in the hospital, it's very hectic. It's very high stress. Literally, patients' lives are at risk, right? I mean, it's everything's on the line at those kinds of jobs. And it's a lot of walking, a lot of standing. My particular job, there was a lot of bending and moving. And I worked in a very busy intensive care unit where we did a lot of procedures. I did a lot of central lines, which is, a big IV in the neck or the chest or the arm. We did chest tubes, which I don't know if you've seen those. And then how people end up on ventilators, they get a breathing tube. I put breathing tubes in. All of this I lived for. I mean, my entire career was critical care and I lived for saving lives, right? I'm a helper. I loved helping people, and to save lives when people were at their most vulnerable was the most rewarding thing I'd ever done. And by this point, I had spent, I mean, like 10 years dedicating my life to this one field of healthcare. And it came to this point where I was struggling to do it, right? It was hard to hold the tiny things and it was hard to stand and squat and get under things and around things. And it was really difficult. And then to kind of add another layer, which I think all career women can relate to was my field was predominantly men, not only men, but male physicians.
Mhm.
In the particular group I was in, I was the only nurse practitioner at the time and the only female. So it was already there was already like this hierarchy, and it was really difficult to go back, after needing to do certain work and not being able to fulfill the work, going back at the end of the day, hey, I didn't get this done. I need your help. It became really frustrating for everybody because I just wasn't able to pull my own weight in this group anymore. So I had to have some really hard conversations, and it was really scary because it was all I knew. And it was what I was so good at. I mean, I was so good at this job, and I knew it inside and out, and I was teaching others to do it. And it was really, really scary to think I wasn't going to be able to do that forever. So I had some hard conversations with my boss at the time, and he was very kind, but we just decided that it was something I couldn't do. So then I had to find something I could do. And that was really scary because with RA, you never know what you can do, right? So I knew, I made my lists of things that I needed to do. I know I needed, a closer parking lot, right? Hospitals, you walk so far just from your car to get in and then all around.
Mhm.
So I knew I needed something shorter distance, less on my feet, something with more manageable hours, something with less exposure to communicable diseases, right? So I had this list. I ended up taking a big jump into outpatient primary care. And it was so different. People think healthcare is healthcare and that everybody kind of knows everything, but it's just not really like that. So to switch to an outpatient setting, any career change is scary with or without any chronic illness. But when I first switched, all I owned was scrubs. I didn't even own professional clothes. So I had to start completely over. I learned and I grew, and I got so healthy from that change, from making those changes and not working nights, weekends, holidays, walking shorter distances, having better meals, having less stress, where of course all healthcare is very important, but it wasn't life or death every minute of every second I was at work, right? So it was really scary. And I remember my big turning point for that pivot was there was a manager in the hospital where I worked. And one day I went in her office and I was just like, hey, can I just bounce this off of you? I don't know if I told you yet, but I have a new diagnosis of RA. And, we kind of talked, and I can't really do this job anymore. What do you think about me going to primary care? And she was like, well, you could probably go downstairs right now and get like 3 job offers. So I don't even know why you're worried about it. And I remember thinking, what? Oh my gosh, she just totally respectfully dismissed my problem. Like she basically told me like your problem is not a problem. And after talking to her, I was like better. And so I did. I got a job like that day, and I started like 10 days after I talked to them. I did primary care for several years. I'm no longer in primary care, but it was a big pivot.
Thank you for sharing that. Whoever is making a big pivot change in their career, I think would relate to you no matter what profession. Going back to the therapy aspect, how did you end up finding someone that was your match?
Do you mean for like talk therapy?
Yeah, like because you had some experiences where you were dismissed or told to, do things that weren't really helpful. How did you end up finding or did you find anyone?
I did not. I
Okay,
never
okay. Yeah,
found
that's what I
a
thought.
good match, but that's what it's amazing how adversity affects humans because having to change jobs, being so afraid, not being able to find any support, that's what made me run this support
Yeah.
group that I led. And then that's what made me open my coaching company that I have today was I basically sat down and I looked at evidence-based practice and things that worked, things that didn't, things I enjoyed, things that didn't, and I put it all together. And I'm sure I could have found somebody if I looked further, but I basically coached myself and I developed my own program that worked because there just wasn't anything, as you know, like you said, 05, 2013, there
Yeah.
just wasn't anything. And I mean, there were a few people, selling supplements or very strict diets, but that was about it. So I never found a good fit.
It's hard to find someone to trust, but also talk to. I wanted to know what kind of things you offer in your coaching program that you kind of wanted for yourself.
I felt like rheumatoid arthritis was a very whole person disease. It's not just joints.
Mhm.
And I felt like so many things were impacted. So I really wanted help with not only nutrition and exercise and sleep, but the mindset work that goes with RA, because there is so much unknown with RA, and you really have to learn to control what you can control and let go of what you can't. And that's what I do with people. I work with all of the physical stuff, the diet, the exercise, the sleep, the education, the medical records review, but also the mental health aspect, just learning to control what you can control, managing your emotions in a time of challenging information, how to have hard conversations, how to respond and not just react, right? It's so easy for us to go down these rabbit holes of emotions just taking over all of our power. So that's what I offer. And that's what honestly helped me the most. I dug back in my old books from school and I found great resources online and I just found ways to cope.
What is your most favorite way that you found helps you cope?
So I use it's a commonly known resource, but people usually just call it the model, and it's about managing your thoughts and emotions around your circumstances. So basically, your circumstances are facts, you can't change them. So, rheumatoid arthritis is a circumstance, there's nothing you can do about it, but you can control your thoughts and emotions about rheumatoid arthritis. And that, for me, my clients, and my patients that I still practice with, has been completely life changing because once you realize that you are in complete control of your thoughts and feelings, the circumstances don't take as much control over you anymore. And it's really great. You can stay in control, you can do what you want, you can set your own goals. You just relearn how to live and how to make your life fulfilling and happy again.
And did you use like journaling as an aspect to get there or to do all that? Or is it more just mindfulness and meditation? Or like, how did you really go about that part?
That's a really good question. So a lot of people suggested journaling, and my thumbs are the worst part of my RA. And I wanted to throw that notebook and pencil like out the window because
Yeah.
I just could not write. And it was, I mean, I felt like I was in like some reality show. Like the world was testing me on, okay, you should journal, but we know you can't, and I was so frustrated. So I started to type, which helped. I type very modified actually. I only use certain fingers, but somehow I've managed to adapt. And then I started using voice journaling. Like you said, when we were diagnosed, there wasn't this type of technology, but now there is this voice technology that is
Yeah.
just endless. So now I find great pleasure in doing that. But as far as what really worked for me and really helped me, there was definitely a focused, challenging, like emotionally challenging, difficult. I did like worksheets and I made workbooks and I sat down and it was a little bit more focused than that. But journaling did help somewhat, but not as much as the focused work did.
That leads me to ask also, when you were kind of like misdiagnosed and told all these different things after the birth of your child, there are some people out there who don't have the medical background or the education and they're being told these things too. So, what advice would you give people who are being told, like, try this, try that, nothing's working, but they're still feeling symptoms?
I get this all the time. And this is something I work with my coaching clients on too. So, first and foremost, you have to go to the right provider. I think a lot of times people go to a provider and maybe they felt like they weren't listened to or they didn't get what they wanted out of the visit. And so then they go back to the provider and they do the same thing again. So, first of all, if you have to go back to the same provider because of insurance or location or whatever restrictions you have to approach it differently. It never hurts to say, I'm still struggling with this. What we worked on last time didn't work. Is there something else you can offer me? And remember, it never hurts to ask, do you understand what I'm saying? Can you summarize back to me what I told you? because sometimes things are just lost in communication. You know, if you said something hurt, but it didn't, and then maybe you talked about your soccer practice, sometimes we're just humans, right? We would link it, oh, it's from her soccer practice. But sometimes you have to go back and summarize what they said and go back to your open communication. So if you have to go back to the same person, approach it differently, ask open questions, make sure they understand. I always say to be polite. Nothing is worse than going into some office and saying, I deserve better, I demand better, raising your voice, flailing your arms. Medical providers are humans too. I'm both, right? I'm a medical professional and a patient. And, we don't want to be threatened. We don't want to be yelled at ever, no matter what we do for a living. Nobody wants to be yelled at. So I think when you start to do that and you're not polite, it just makes people shut down, whether or not you're getting good care or not. So, and then I also say, if you really feel like you're not getting answers or you're not being heard, or maybe something that's available out there isn't being offered to you, you can look elsewhere. There are so many ways now to get a second opinion or to just see somebody else in a group. There are so many ways just to talk to somebody else. And then also, I think it's really important to remember that sometimes I hear a lot, we hear this a lot in all the groups and online. People will say like, oh, I saw my rheumatologist. They didn't even listen because they didn't offer me another treatment. And sometimes I think it's important to remember that treatments are science. It's pharmacology. It's what's out there. So sometimes if something wasn't offered, there just might not be something else available. It's not that your rheumatologist doesn't like you or doesn't listen to you, or it's not that they're dismissing your symptoms, but maybe there just isn't another treatment option or another dose, or maybe they need to watch you on this certain medication for more time. So sometimes I think we let our human emotions kind of get in the way. Those would be my tips. If you have to go back, approach it differently, be polite, and just remember that rheumatology is still a science and it's still a relatively new science. And there aren't a whole lot of answers yet, even though we're making great headway every single day.
Yeah, you make a good point there because medical providers are human. They don't have the answers that we want them to have. And I think that's where the frustration lies a lot of the times, where it's like, well, you're a doctor, you should have something that works for me, or why isn't this working for my body? And then, it kind of leads to like the victim mentality or blaming the doctor. I mean, yes, of course, there's been instances where doctors have failed in a sense with patients, or they haven't been the best.
Right.
Then there's other instances where it's like you have to also take responsibility for yourself as a patient and look at your own lifestyle and your own ways of doing things and being, okay, what can I do, like you said, to change and take control, because we're also in the driver's seat of our health. So our doctors can only meet us halfway. So did you ever make like those lifestyle changes, diet, or whatever else? Or did you kind of already do that?
As far as lifestyle changes, definitely. I made dramatic lifestyle changes when I was first diagnosed. I knew as a medical professional the available options and what science could do for me. And I knew with my experience, of course, what lifestyle options were available to me. And I'd seen thousands of patients already that were on medical treatment and lifestyle treatment and both. And I knew that it took both. I just knew you can't do one without the other. I made a ton of huge changes. First was losing weight. Of course, after a pregnancy is always really hard. I had a really tough pregnancy, but I lost the baby weight. I stayed active, but in different ways than I was before. I found hobbies and other ways to, as you said before, to be mindful of my life, to take time for myself, to do things that were more gratifying than just working, and definitely diet. I found a lot of relief in my diet changes. Now, with that being said, I don't think there's a single diet that really works for everybody, but I do think that people definitely have certain triggers.
Yeah.
And of course, eating obvious junk food all the time is never good for any inflammatory disease. So I definitely eliminated some foods for life. I've definitely made a ton of lifestyle changes.
That's great. So where can people find you? Just let people know where they can connect with you.
Yeah. So my website is rheumatoidarthritiscoach.com. You can Google rheumatoid arthritis coach or my name, Stefanie Remson. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and then I do write for most of the sources that we all read and love. And yeah, I'm very reachable. Just reach out. I'd love to help.
You're a great resource. Thank you for coming on and talking with me today. So, for sure, everyone go connect with Stefanie. She's amazing. As the article says, you really are.
Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
having me, and thanks for
thank
the
you.
compliment.
Yeah, no problem.